Hi, and welcome to the End Times Bible Study. There's no other Bible study like it because I'm not a minister or a teacher or a leader. I'm not credentialed. I don't have a clergy or an organization or a denomination behind me. I don't look for money or fame or followers. The explicit desire of my heart is that God is glorified and that we are prepared. And as we're doing this End Times Bible study, it's getting rid of presuppositions, which can blind us to all kinds of things. Um, because we've watched the Left Behind series or Late Great Planet Earth or some other thing, there is a fairly settled mindset on what the end times will look like. And as we're doing this Bible study, it's without presuppositions, just going through the scriptures a bit at a time and praying that the Holy Spirit will reveal to us the things that we need to know so that we can be prepared. The last thing we want is for Jesus to return and us to be found not doing what he told us to do, which unfortunately I see many people doing right now. So we want not to be wise with wisdom. We want to have our eyes opened so that we may behave properly. We may take the necessary steps now while we have time. So tonight we are in Revelation chapter 6. We're going through the breaking of the seals, and we're in verses 5 and 6 tonight. And this is the third seal, called famine. When he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." Bit of a perplexing verse. Now, we saw in the first seal that the rider was on a white horse, and it looked like false religion was a likely candidate for that. As Jesus said, many false Christs, false apostles, false preachers would go forth in the end times and deceive many. And we see the fruits of that. And you have to ask, does this mean that that seal has been broken? And then the second seal, war. And Jesus said we would hear wars and rumors of wars, but do not be alarmed. These things must take place. And we're hearing rumors of war all over the planet, and it's not calming down, it's ramping up, it's escalating planet wide. Does this mean that this seal has been broken and that these events are apocalyptic and are ordained to happen? And now the third seal, famine. Well, aside from typical famines in Sudan and Nigeria, Kenya, and other parts of Africa, where we see Haiti, we seem to hear about famines regularly in these areas. Famines have always been a part of humanity, but this is something different. We've always had war, but this is something different. We've always had false teachers. You can read them all through the New Testament, and yet something different is taking place in our time. So when it speaks of famine, it's going to be something different, which is really scary because, frankly, for generations now, since the Depression in the 30s, we haven't really experienced desperation. A desperation that people in biblical times, when their city was under siege, the food supplies ran out, and that was it. There was no more food. There was nothing to eat. And we read about two moms who made a deal. They would eat one of their children one day and the other's child the following day. And the mother who had consumed the flesh of the first mother's child refused to give over her child. heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, and thank the Lord in heaven, we've never lived in such dire circumstances, such horrific circumstances, where we could actually consider consuming one of our own children to stay alive. You know, we have been blessed, but that doesn't mean that things can't change. And right now, all over the planet, we are seeing something very interesting. In the Midwest of the United States, millions upon millions of acres of crops didn't happen this year because of flooding. And in Europe, the same thing. So many crops aren't happening this year because of drought. In the middle of Canada, same thing. Many crops aren't happening because of drought. And ranchers aren't able to feed their herds. They're having to downsize their herds. We see food suppliers downsizing and going bankrupt in a number of different areas. And the interesting part of this is that in almost all of the scientific articles that I've seen, they refer to climate change as the culprit. Climate change is causing our crop shortages, and this could spiral. It could grow worse. And I said all along, climate change is Satan's way of getting out in front of these seals being broken. And every evil that's visited upon us is going to be blamed on climate change. So a lot of people will be deceived. They will think that it's man-made climate change. If we can all control our bodily functions and stop driving cars, the earth will return to a utopia. It's complete nonsense. Man-made climate change plays little to no, I shouldn't say that. Man's contribution to the CO2 level is insignificant at 0.1%. It's just insignificant. Changes in the sun, changes in the weather, changes in the ocean temperatures have a much bigger impact on the planet. Now, fish are dying off all over the place. No one knows why. You see suddenly this shore or that shore covered with dead fish. We have no idea what's going on there. And fish is a major contributor to our food consumption. 8 billion people on the planet, they've all got to eat. And if the fish are dying off and the crops are failing and the farmers are going bankrupt, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that we're headed towards difficult times. And I want to add at the end of the podcast a thought of my own, not really related to the Bible study, but I'm going to hold that until the end. So, is the third seal broken? And are we seeing the beginnings of crop failures on an ongoing basis? What if it floods next year in the US? What if it's drought in Canada and Europe again? Will and China has been bombarded with typhoons. I think 9 different typhoons. How many of their crops have been lost? Um, it I can't say either way whether these seals have actually been broken or not, but it would seem like they have been. Honest to goodness, it would seem like they've been broken and things are starting. We can actually see these things happening around us. Now in verse 6 it says, I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures. So this voice is not coming from the 4 living creatures, but it's something like a voice. John is struggling to put into words what is taking place before his eyes. And I think he did a marvelous job, but at the same time, I can see through the cracks that something a lot more crazy, a lot more hard to get your head around was going on here. Um, you know, heaven will just blow our minds. We are not mentally prepared to see these things. And John was in the spirit. His flesh wasn't up there seeing these things. He was caught up in the spirit to see these things. And his spirit was struggling with what he was seeing and hearing. Man, I can't wait. But it goes on to say a quart of wheat for a denarius, I just realized that there is a, yeah, I'll finish reading it first. A quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine. So this sounds like a pronouncement that's really bad. A quart of wheat for a denarius. And I just noticed a little reference to that. And then down below it says a denarius was equivalent to a day's wages. And that's one interpretation of the value of a denarius. The most strict interpretation is that it was worth 10 donkeys. Yeah, 10 donkeys. And that's what the word denarii, meaning, I can't remember exactly, but 10 donkeys. That's what a denarius was worth. So I don't think you could even earn a donkey with 1 day's labor. So 10 of them, we're talking quite a bit of value. In today's society, it would be bringing a significant portion of your wealth, maybe 10% of your wealth for a quart of wheat. And I'm perplexed by the part that says, do not damage the oil and the wine. Now, do not damage. So damage the wheat and barley then, which is what we're seeing right now. Damage to the croplands, the farmlands, so that they are unable to produce. And you know what's really kind of sad is that God is the one who causes the seed to grow. We can put a seed in the ground, but it's just a little dry, dead husk. And God is the one who brings all things to life. It's a miracle. I don't care if a scientist cut open a seed at various stages and put labels on them. That doesn't give the scientist the power to make that seed into something living that produces food for us. And we've been brainwashed to believe that through science, nothing is a miracle anymore. It's all natural. How do we jump to the conclusion that seed springs into life by itself naturally? That's the way it's supposed to work. Isn't God giving it life? And yet, no, are we giving God thanks? You know, there are so many people on the planet today who are eating God's food and cursing him with the same mouth, mocking, scoffing, reviling, with the same mouth they use to consume all the good food that he has provided for us. And he did that out of kindness and compassion. And now we're in the judgment. We're in the end times. It's time to call all things to account. And one of the things we see, the crops are going to be damaged. And we're seeing that before our very eyes. So I'm leaning towards the fact that these seals have in fact been broken, and that we're actually seeing the results of that before our very eyes. Now, the thing that I wanted to tag on to the end has completely slipped my mind. So, oh, yeah, okay. I watched a really interesting video on an organic greenhouse that is heated with geothermal heating, and I was surprised how simple this geothermal heating is to access. This farmer had a decent area of land that he built about 100-foot long greenhouse on, and the geothermal, he measured 8 feet down in the soil what the temperature was, and he found a portion of his land where the temperature was a constant 62 degrees. And he laid down 8-inch drainage pipe and ran it to the greenhouse. And I believe in all there were 8 different pipes laid out. And in the winter, his greenhouse is growing oranges, and I believe he's in Nebraska. Citrus fruits, grapes, you name it. It is just producing phenomenal fruit at a very good size. He was growing mandarins that are about twice the size of what we're used to, completely organic, and it looked so fresh and perfect and delicious. Oh, and he said that what he's producing in his greenhouse could feed a small town. And, I'm just beside myself. Why aren't more people doing that? Don't we have the potential of incorporating a greenhouse into our home where we're producing an ongoing crop for our own consumption? We're so dependent on the food grid right now to go to the store and get the things we need. And it's so convenient, and there's so many choices, and man, oh man, you can just go nuts on all your favorite foods, that eating has become something of an entertainment to us more than just something to keep our bodies alive. And that's why you see a plague, literal plague of obesity and bad eating habits. And if the powers that be truly cared about us, they would be steering us towards a more natural and wholesome food source where we could have the power to look after ourselves to some degree, like this farmer has done. And if the Lord tarries long enough, I'm certainly going to be looking at setting up some degree of greenhouse in my home. Whatever, if I can attach something, whatever I can grow, and not just so me and my family can be happy and comfortable while the world collapses around us, but so that we can bless others and at the same time minister. Once again, I want to remind you, this will be one of the greatest opportunities of ministry in the world. And we don't want to be blind to that. We want to be ready to share the gospel, share the word of life. This world, the lights are going out. It's getting shut down. It's over. But there is a better place. And, multitudes are going to hell. Multitudes will face the wrath of God. And God has given us a precious gift through the gospel to share it with love, with compassion. It's good news. It's the word of life. It's the power of God transforming us into his children. So, by way of encouragement, I want you to consider having a little bit of food stored up. I've started, and each week I'm accumulating more food, once again, with the idea of being able to feed as many as I can for as long as I can. And I'm not pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, or anything. I'm just going to be prepared, and when the Lord takes us, the Lord takes us. And if I have to endure till the end, so be it. If I'm taken right away, that's great. Anyways, thanks for joining me tonight. God bless you.